What's the best way for someone with no experience to break into marketing?
To start doing it for yourself. Create whatever you can to get out there in the world and test it.
Welcome back to Put It on the Counter podcast, and I'm Randy Paul, the brand strategist of The Corner Store. This episode is titled The Market is Open, where culture meets strategy and stories become blueprints. Today's guest is someone who's not just led brands, but built culture. Daniel Cherry III, DC, is the Global Chief Marketing Officer at Dickies, with a career that spans DC Comics, Adidas, Activision Blizzard, Diageo, and more. From helping launch the And One mixtape series in college, to co-creating Grammy-nominated work for Nike, to leading global marketing for some of the world's most influential brands, Daniel has mastered the art of turning grassroots culture into business strategy. But beyond the titles, he's a father, a mentor, and a blueprint for what it means to lead with purpose, especially as a black man in this industry. And in full circle fashion, he's also the father of our very own art director at the Corner Store, Sydney Cherry. So whether you're building a brand, chasing your breakthrough, or figuring out your creative voice, this one's for you. Let's open the market to Daniel Cherry.
That was an amazing intro. Appreciate that. Well done. I need to kick that written down and share that with the family.
Let's do it.
Remind myself who I am. Appreciate it.
Across all the forms, products, services, what's the constant about how you approach the consumer?
It's a great question. Trends come and go, but how you approach the problem should stay the same. It's like an athlete, pre-game ritual, right? You have training. For me, it's always of service and with humility. You have to be of service. It's not about you, especially in marketing and branding. You have to actually meet the market. The market's open and the market decides. Same as culture. Culture decides. You don't drive culture. At best, you try to surf it. And it's like identifying a wave. Right, a great surfer can identify that wave, but guess what? Mother Nature creates the wave. And if you understand that culture is not created by you, that's the humility. That to me is the kind of humble nature you need to have to do this job well.
You worked with brands that both sell and symbolize culture. But how do you build campaign to do both?
Honestly, it's not about campaigns. It's about what I consider defining gestures. Culture is a highly intelligent social order. Right, there are nodes that you don't see that it's like ants underground, right? It's highly, kind of organized. You may not always see it, but there are things that kind of move things around that begin shifts, whether it be a new tunnel over here or right a flight over here or migration there, and you don't always see those things. And so campaigns are all moments in time. Right. So if there's shifts happening, the campaign's a moment in time. The reality is it's not about the campaign. It's about what are the defining gestures you make that can point toward the intent of the brand and let the culture know you're with them. Right. So it's almost a call and response. Again, campaigns are about commercial initiatives. What I consider defining gestures are about kind of tips of the cap to culture. That could be a gifting. That's why product collaborations are oftentimes not about how much revenue you make. It's about have you identified the right people that we as consumers see as the next, and you notice them too, and you're giving them a platform by engaging your big brand. That's ultimately what it's about. It's never really about how much money you make off the collaboration. It's about a defining gesture of, oh, we hear you and we get it too, and we see what you see. The number of ways you could do that. Sponsorships are another way that you can say, oh, this is important to you. We're going to make sure that it sustains itself by putting a little money in the coffer. Again, campaigns are hyper commercial. And you can hit a node correctly, meaning you can actually sell something well and leverage culture in doing so. But I think it's much more about all those smaller defining gestures that people will notice more than the commercial campaign that you create.
For sure. I appreciate that. I want to get a little personal. So we got some little details from Sydney.
Okay.
So you left Ohio when you were 13 and go to California.
I did.
And then you went to Penn. I think a question as a black man is, how did you know that you had to leave where you were from and make these moves to better your life today?
You went to deep cuts already. How did I know? I had a sense that there was a world greater than my block, and I saw the world differently than most people. I almost felt like I was an alien sometimes. Like I look at things differently, I dress differently, I listen to different music. Like there's something that's not the same with me and my surrounding. And I thought really early, about 12, that I outgrew my environment and I knew my path. I saw it. I mentioned, to you guys earlier that I worked backward. So I already saw where I was going to go. I was like, that's not enough. I saw 15, 20 years. I was good at hoop. I already saw what I was going to do at hoop in the neighborhood and the community that I was going to be in. I was like, I want more than that. And so I had to make that call. I got luckily support of a great mentor, early mentor of mine named Nadine McElwain, give flowers where flowers is due. And she was the principal who saw something in me. I had an inkling that I outgrew the space, but she saw the potential of what I could be and gave me an opportunity. And that became the Better Chance program, which led me to go and make a decision at 13 to move all the way to California, sight unseen. Never seen the Pacific Ocean, never been to the West Coast. I've barely been on a plane before I moved out to Cali at 13, and kind of went throughout high school. Lived on a campus near Santa Barbara, Montecito, completely different than Ohio. But once I made that move, I think one of the questions that one of your colleagues asked is, what do you mean by fail faster? And the reason why I can say that failing fast is important is because I made such big risks early in my career, right? Because it could have been a failure, right? There were days where I thought it was the wrong move for sure, but because I made that move young, every other move I made that could have been harder was seemed easier because I already made the biggest decision in my life at 13. So every business decision that I made didn't seem nearly as tough because I knew what tough really was. And as an entrepreneur or have an entrepreneurial mindset, if you're actually living your own life and making your own way, the more you can make tough decisions and see how that plays out, the easier it is to make the next tough decision.
That's perfect. To add on that, what made you spark and won in college?
It's funny. The way Wharton is based, there is an undergrad program, which I was in at Penn, and there's a grad program. So the folk that actually started it were grad students, and I was an undergrad. So they were kind of older cohort, and we saw them playing pickup ball and in and around campus. And my goal was to go there actually to play basketball, but I broke my patella playing a playground tournament with my cousin a month before I went to school. So I literally was rehabbing. That's why I was able to see these guys playing the kind of rec gym versus right on the team because I was rehabbing with the rest of the kids on campus. And the reason why I knew that the mixtape was going to work was because of my background. I talked about understanding cultural trends and having a high cultural IQ. Because I was kind of Midwest but raised on East Coast hip hop and understood what a mixtape was, a hip hop mixtape, and I went to boarding school near Santa Barbara and Montecito and hung around a bunch of skateboard kids and surfer kids. I knew what a skate video was. If you actually take a hip hop mixtape from the East Coast and a skate punk video, that's the name of one mixtape. A skate video are punk rock music, about 40 minutes in length, skate tricks. A hip hop mixtape are short songs, oftentimes over others' beats, with drops and a DJ being the host. If you look at the N1 mixtape, it's basically a hip hop mixtape and a skate video because instead of skate, it was basketball tricks to music. Instead of punk rock, it was hip hop. So if you understand how culture works, I took something I knew worked in a certain subculture that was relevant and applied it to another subculture that was relevant. And that to me is why I knew it was going to be relatively successful because I had a model, right? I had a brand analog that I can draft off of.
And then I think we're going to keep building. Because we're recognizing that you recognize that you think differently than people. I think strategists, they have a skill of understanding the why and everything and seeing how everything works behind the scenes. For someone that, you don't come from an advertising background, like your parents didn't do it,
No.
you said your father worked 40 years. Who or what system allowed to take that raw knowledge and provide language into account planning or strategic processing?
That's a great question. I didn't know what account planning was until I got into advertising. I didn't know that the way I saw the world was actually strategy. That's not what you're taught, right? I also don't have a British accent. So many of the strategists when I got in advertising were, right, British. The APGs was a British organization, right? The account planning group, right? .co.uk. That was the preeminent planners of the world. So I always was an outsider in that industry, but I was an outsider in culture in general. And I think one of the things that I noticed pretty early was that the black and brown folk that, I grew up with and that I saw be successful, culture came so easy to us. We always talk about for the culture. But one of the things that I noticed is that the culture doesn't own the brands. that make money off culture. So as much as we love the culture, we take it for granted because we may choose something, and that's something that we choose, mean the culture deems it successful, it takes off. But somehow when we own something with all that same taste that allows us to choose the right brand, the things we own don't nearly become as successful as the things we prefer. So oftentimes the culture's preference is more powerful than the culture's ownership. And for me, I want to find a way to actually better understand how we can own and still have that same kind of cultural IQ and that same cultural benefit. And sometimes that means not even letting people know we own it and letting people, right, assume we chose it. And that's the game, unfortunately, we as people of color have to play that others don't. But many people don't know what holding groups, what family offices own many brands, right? So we don't need to tout it from the mountaintops and shout it from, right, the rooftops, but we need to find the things that we know, the things that we impact, and ideally try to get as much equity in those things as possible because our preference would drive the business. And that to me is what I saw about advertising, is that if I can actually understand how culture works and get inside the organizations that move culture forward, then I can have an outsized impact because I see how we choose and how we have taste and how we move and how that creates ripples in business. And if I can actually find a way to package that and communicate that, then that's actually, I think, a benefit to business. But the goal always has been, how do we own more than we purchase?
Got it. My next question is, when you just dipped your toe into advertising, how did you get into one of the best agencies in the world, Wieden and Kennedy?
That's a great question. Shout out to John Jay. John Jay was our creative director. He now runs Fastco Retailing, which owns Uniqlo and a bunch of brands. But John saw talent in me. Dan Wieden, obviously, rest in peace, is our advertising godfather. But I had access and experience back to kind of, right, getting your reps young. I clearly helped build a successful basketball brand as an 18, 19-year-old kid called And1 that was actually making some noise. And the second of Wieden and Kennedy or Nike hears that some young kid in college is building a brand that's generating hundreds of millions of dollars and working with a, bunch of folks that have far less resources than they do, they're like, well, can we talk to this kid? Is he a free agent? Is it possible? But that wasn't the first step that I made. I made the step to work at Crispin Porter Bogusky, which was the agency that we hired for And1. And so I got my toe in the water, not at Wieden actually, but at Crispin. So Crispin's the agency that took a risk on me. They actually listened to a 19-year-old kid who was their client and said, you know what? You actually have a knack for this, and you could probably help us not just on this brand because you understand basketball, but you actually have something greater to give, and maybe you could work on other brands. And that's actually the first time that I realized that I can do something beyond my passion, which I thought was basketball, and it became advertising. And once you actually do one thing well and have some success, then the next move becomes a bit easier because you've proven yourself. And because I proved myself with And1 and with Crispin, the Wieden conversation and everything they had to bring to the table with Nike became that much easier because they saw the work. They didn't see portfolio. They actually saw work in the marketplace. That's why you should always try to put work out in culture, work out in the world, because that actually is where the rubber meets the road.
And now, how do you bring your own flair and your own culture when it's deemed appropriate into the work?
It's a great question. Everybody has their own style. Um, Everybody has their own aesthetic. But back to the original point I made about humility, it's never about you.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked with our editors and I worked with Set Free and we were building the mixtapes back in the day, right? There's a reason why, for those who have ever seen an A1 mixtape, there's a reason why we rewound the footage, right, and played it back multiple times because we put ourselves in the kid sitting pre-DVD, VHS, or right eventually when DVDs were part of the mix for the mixtapes because the first mixtapes were VHS only, and then we went to DVD. But if you had a DVD player, you didn't want to get the remote and rewind the VHS to the part that you liked, the move that you thought was dope that you might have missed because you were hanging out with your boys and we were clapping over the last move. We knew that. So we didn't think about what we wanted. We put ourselves in the seat of the kid watching the mixtape on the couch with his boys. It's like, you know what? Let's rewind this anyway. Let's bring that back, right? So that they can see it so they don't have to actually do anything. We're just going to bring it back multiple times. That to me is that instinct that it's not about you. It's about what can you do to delight the consumer who cares about it more than anything else, right? Or who needs this thing to perform better than anyone else. What can you do? Back to that being of service. So that to me is what I focus on more than anything. Not how I see the world, not, what my ideas are and my perspective is and what my taste level is. It's about how can I create as much delight and joy and purpose and function for this consumer as possible. And the way you do that, the expressiveness that you bring to the table with that is who you are, is what you uniquely, right, can provide. Because your flair will be different than someone else's flair. But the what is very clear. It's about the consumer and their joy and their delight and their utility. And the how is where you bring your taste and your ideas to the table. Some people get it twisted. They think that the what is their idea, the what is their taste. No, the what is about the consumer. The how is what you bring to the table.
That's perfect because it goes into the next question. When you're working in a new industry, what's the first step you take to identify the right audience?
I look at two things. I look at who's buying it and who's adopting it. What I mean by that is there are always people who are wearing things for the thing that it was built for, and there are people who are wearing it for lifestyle, right? Or who have adopted it for another use. And I always look at those two things, right? Where's the core of the volume, and where is there a white space that the brand isn't actually tapping into that can create a ripple for something else? So I always try to find whatever brand or product that we're looking at. I try to find who and where. Also, where it matters. Where are they purchasing the most stuff, and then in what channel? That's the volume conversation because that's 80% of your business is actually making sure you can deliver that quarter by quarter, and that extra 20% is how you actually grow, right? Innovation or how you build diversification in your portfolio, or how you can even come up with different colors or different ideas, or begin to leverage talent from this little subculture and apply it to the volume driving part of the business because they have a mutual affinity that they didn't know about. But I always want to think about who's driving the volume and using it for the thing that is intended for, and who actually is right potentially right adopting it for another use. And that's what lifestyle is altogether, right? Most running shoes are built to walk and hang out in, right? Think about a Nike Dunk, which is a skate shoe, but the term dunk clearly means basketball, slam dunk. So it was a basketball shoe. So people adopted it for another purpose,
Mhm.
even though the function of it was basketball. So now you have a basketball consumer and a skate consumer off of the same product. And now you can modify that product to support a new audience, which became the majority, but started out as the 20% skate, and the core audience, basketball. That's a perfect example of how you can begin to think about the utility and function and how it's adopted, right? Jordan 1 was a skate shoe, but also was a high performing basketball shoe, which ended up becoming the gateway to the dunk, right?
Yep. That's amazing. How do you balance chasing a new audience without alienating your current one?
The beauty of media now is that it's hyper segmented. And that also probably is a detriment when it comes to kind of, right, our polarization of culture and community. But it gives you avenues to go down to test ideas to decide how you want to create a larger initiative or campaign behind it. So to me, I love the fact that we can actually use different platforms to test ideas and maybe again create some green shoots with that 20% that I mentioned that might be adopting it. There might be a different avenue and a different way of engaging that consumer than the main consumer. As an example, one of the bigger brands that I had that was suffering from this kind of almost schizophrenia of two different consumer groups is a brand when I worked at Diageo, Crown Royal, an iconic brand. I'll never forget that in Atlanta at the time, near the Georgia Dome and right down there where the Hawks play, you had one weekend was the rodeo, and the next night was the NBA All Star weekend in Atlanta. Both were sponsored by Crown Royal. Both consumer groups believe that that product is theirs. So, cowboys, ranchers, folks, right, from the South and the West, horses, right, buffalo, right, and farms, and Southwest Atlanta, right? Macon, Georgia, Louisiana, they all thought the brand was theirs. That brand can exist in both places. But to your point about media and engagement, those are two completely different audiences that don't overlap, yet they both believe they have just as much right and ownership of that brand as possible. But you can build it in both places. Then the key and the magic is how do you create a values-based model where those two worlds can, right, kind of rub up against each other sometimes. That's when magic and sparks fly. That to me is some of the best work is when these disparate groups might be all engaging in, right, a brand or a product, and the brand finds a way to bring the community together. That's a very hard thing to do, but that to me is where it gets most powerful when 1 + 1 = 3.
That was perfect. Um, Honestly, this might answer the next one of, does your marketing approach change depending on whether you're selling something?
Whether I'm selling something?
Yeah. So does your marketing approach change between different clients?
So there are, yes, your tactics change. My approach, meaning how I look to try to solve a problem, there is a rigor that I put into problem solving that is part of my process. So that doesn't change as much. But the expressiveness of the idea, the way in which we might sell it in or execute it, absolutely changes because the consumers are the most important thing. So I will deliver an idea as best I can through the channels that make most sense for that consumer. So I'm absolutely of service when it comes to how the idea needs to live in the world, but I'm pretty, kind of, rigid on the meticulousness and the detail of the process of arriving at that idea.
Perfect. Um, Another question that I want to ask you is, as you know, at the Marcus Graham Project, we're working with GMC and Apple,
Hmm.
and specifically me, I'm working on GMC with Sydney.
Okay.
As you know, she's our art director. I'm the brand strategist, and I was listening to the DJ Premier classic record. So, how did that come about?
Oh my goodness! Shout out to Thibaut de Longueville in Paris, France, who shot that as our director. He actually just last year won Best Documentary for a DJ Mehdi documentary. So if you guys are into documentaries and music, DJ Mehdi is like a DJ Premier of Paris. And he just got a Cannes Best Documentary Award for that. And he also is a director behind Just for Kicks, which is an iconic sneaker documentary. And so the reason why I bring him up first and foremost is because it comes about by having an idea and having a crew of people who buy into the idea who are best at what they do. There's only a few people in the world that you can entrust with that idea of bringing those artists together behind, right, an idea, an ad technically, um, and getting them in a room or a space that they're comfortable enough to be filmed in a recording studio or right behind a mic. And Tebow is the guy that can get that done for us. So we wouldn't have had it captured if it wasn't for someone like Tebow that can actually be able to curate that well. So knowing the right people on your crew to get it done, every campaign is kind of like a heist, like Ocean's 11. And you got to have a guy, or you got to bring another person to the table that can perform under pressure. That's really what that means. When someone says, I have a guy, or I got somebody that can do that, what they really mean is, I trust this person to handle it under pressure, and they get it the way we get it, and they will bring as much to the table, if not more, and meet our right ambition and our standards. That's what it's about. And so only people who have the same or higher standards than you can actually execute ideas like that. And that's honestly how we were able to capture it. The idea came about as a Hail Mary for the 25th anniversary of the Air Force One. We were trying to struggle with ideas, and we had to find a way to kind of capture the essence of what the Air Force One meant for 25 years to a brand as iconic as the swoosh. And with John Jay's guidance and the team, we figured it out, and that became an iconic part of the campaign.
Classic.
I see what you did there.
Timeless.
Well
I'm
done.
sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. So I was writing an article, and I said that the three people that inspired me getting into this space is Clarence Avant, Steve Stout, and Quincy Jones.
Hmm.
So we see Steve Stout with translation, and this is news to me that you helped build Anomaly. So what was that transition like, going from Wine and going into Anomaly?
Yeah, it was a few friends of ours. So Anomaly had already existed, and it had a member of our team. He's actually a media director that joined the agency first. And he wanted me to join him as well. But if you know anything about creative, you need to make sure you have a great partner, especially as a strategist. I need to make sure I got my right hand with me, which is my creative director. And our creative director was currently at Wyden with me. And I was like, I'm not leaving unless he leaves. And if he leaves, then I leave and we can go build this thing together. And some folks from Chiat had already joined with our media lead. And we ended up joining together, took the leap. And we had a client because we knew we were an upstart agency and we were going to push the boundaries on creativity. This is one of the things that I don't think many other agencies did at the time, but we actually hired one of our clients to be our partner. So we had a person who helped run advertising at Nike join Anomaly as our partner, as part of our kind of managing partnership group, so that when me and my creative partner would come up with ideas, we would bring our third party, which is our client, so that when we're pitching ideas to the client, and you sit across the table, and the dynamics of advertising are the client wants to be right, the person who has a taste, wants to take the risks, wants to get the reward. We had a client that already did that on our side of the table. So the client that we're pitching wants to be just like the guy that we have on our team. And they can almost shepherd that person through the process of buying the idea because they had to do it at Nike, which is the pinnacle of advertising. And that was a little subtle nuance that allowed us to kind of manage the psychology of rooms within advertising that I thought was pretty cool, and unique to what we were doing at the time. But it takes great creative, takes great strategy, takes great teamwork, and a group of people that are willing to take risks. Because when you're an upstart agency, you literally, right, eat what you kill, right? You have to make money off selling ideas, and that's a hard business, a really, really hard business, but the most enjoyable business that I think I've been a part of, because you knew that you earned it, because didn't exist, and all of a sudden it exists, and you're at the shoot, and you're seeing how it exists in culture, and you're seeing how it moves the business, and you knew a time when that idea wasn't in the world. That's a pretty powerful and exhilarating feeling.
That's amazing. I know a lot of people that start businesses, they say that this is their baby, but you said before in our other conversation that a lot of businesses are built to be sold. So what made you pivot out of that since you built something so great?
Um, for me, I always wanted to create the biggest impact possible. And I mentioned my kind of professional mission being, right, to chase challenges and create positive change in culture. It was pretty clear to me during that time in advertising that I had a affinity for brand building, and brand building isn't something that only advertising agencies do. I mean, technically, brands are the clients inherently. So it seemed like an obvious next step for me to become, right, client facing. And if you recall, early in my career, I started out as a client. We started out with And1, and we found an agency called, right, Crispin. So that to me was natural. And most people in advertising may have not ever been brand side and they went agency side. I didn't even know that's what I did until I reflected on my career. How did I understand how brands work? Well, I started in the brand. But when I was in my career early on, I assumed I was an ad guy because I took for granted that I was part of an entrepreneurial group building a brand. So that was what made it easier for me, is because I understood the power of what a brand can do in culture. And if my mission is to chase challenges and create positive change in culture, then brands are probably the best place for me to do that.
That's perfect. I want to. I like this question actually.
All right.
What's more important in global marketing, consistency or flexibility?
It's a great question. When it comes to understanding who you are and what you stand for, consistency. When it comes to how you express who you are and how you exist in the culture, flexibility. But oftentimes, because you want to chase culture, you get too flexible with things that should be inflexible. You bend things that should never be bent. You should be really, really clear on what you are and who you stand for, and find as many ways as possible to express that in culture. So flexibility in the how, but the who and the why, right, should be consistent.
That was perfect. I want to push a little bit forward towards your timeline.
Okay.
So you talked about, you understand what's going to be cool because you understand from like you do like a work back schedule. So our brand managers always speak like, hey, this is what we have to do, but let's do a work back schedule. And I find that iconic because you can gauge what's going to be popular and you have, inside knowledge of how things move. Talk to me about your time at Adidas and dealing with something so global, knowing that a part of the business accounted for a lot of the business, and you had to make the executive decision to not only build something else, but not many people could understand why you're doing this.
You're right. Not even my own family sometimes. It was a tough time, to be honest. But I give a lot of credit to the core team that we had with us, who knew in their heart of hearts what the right decision was. It was always about how you orchestrate that decision. Because I think one piece of insight that oftentimes gets overlooked is that any decision that a brand makes, and I can say this firsthand, having been someone who's for the culture, for our people, for my family, right? And oftentimes, you know, vote against my quote unquote best economic interests because I believe in giving back or supporting, right, those in need. When a brand makes a decision like the one that was made with Adidas, thousands of people are impacted, right? Tens of thousands of lives are affected. And so even though you know it's the right thing to do, you need to orchestrate that, because the goal is to try to create as soft a landing as possible for all of these people, where the decision might be clear as day. You know what you should do. The how is what you need to orchestrate. The other thing that's important in business that I think some folks don't always understand is that a contract protects both sides, whether one side you think is right or wrong. So you also have to make sure that you navigate the legalities of a decision that you make. Because when you're a publicly traded company or you are a company that has international relationships, one wrong move and one wrong, right, decision can impact the future of your business. And that is something that, as a leader of a business, you have fiduciary responsibility, right? To make sure you put the best of the business interests in mind. And that might sound cold and callous to some people, but that's literally your job. And sometimes it becomes legally, right, an implication. And so for me, with that opportunity, it was really clear what we needed to do. I was absolutely supportive of the decision, worked as best I could behind the scenes on the how, also being the front lines of the face of it. That to me was not as big a deal to me personally because I knew where I stood. I knew what my values were. It's really tough for my family. It's really tough for my friends. Really tough for my colleagues because they saw my name being dragged through the mud. But that wasn't to me what it was about. It was about doing whatever I could to protect my team. I told my team when I first got into this office, the first day, that I'm two things for them. I'm Kevlar when things go bad, and I'm sunshine or a spotlight when things go good. So if things are great, all you. Things go tough, I take the hits. That's what you do as a leader. That's why you get paid, the money you get paid. And this is what I needed to do. I need to go to work that day and every day during that process and earn that. And this time I had to be more Kevlar. Other times I had to be more spotlight. And I was okay with that. But you have to sign up for that. You have to know that's what leadership's about. It's really easy to be a leader when times are going good, right? But I say oftentimes a conviction's not a real conviction unless it costs you something. People can say they care about things and they stand for stuff, but will you, if it strikes you down and knocks you down to your knee, will you stand up and stand for that again? It's really easy to stand for it when it doesn't matter. It mattered, and I stood on, 10 toes down on what I believed in, and thankfully it worked out for the best. But I give a lot of credit to the team that was standing beside me and behind me that allowed that to happen. And to your point, the other side of that, I mentioned not being flexible in things you stand for. The brand stood for many things in culture, and the brand that is true to itself will see the thing that is core to itself be the most successful. And that's also, I think, oftentimes why the Samba craze became the Samba, because it was actually the product that was core to the brand. The brand stood on what it was founded on originally as a soccer brand, as a quote unquote football brand, and that shoe became, I think, a symbol of the brand getting back to itself.
Mhm.
And the success was actually, amazing to see, candidly.
Perfect. I'm seeing a pattern where you really focus on the brand. You don't focus on the people that are associated with the brand when it comes to building it. Um, we see a lot of brands, they focus on collaborations. Like they live and die by who they associate themselves with because they think they're going to take that audience. What is a successful collaboration if you do it or if you choose to do it?
It's a great question. I think Ouija from Brooklyn Circus has done a lot of good work on social media around collaborations. So I think shout out to him. For me, a collaboration has to have a business objective. The question becomes, one, are you aligning your values? Because before you get to business, it's like two folks who want to engage in, any kind of relationship. What are you basing that relationship on? If you're both out to get paper, then you're not going to create a relationship that is of substance. Because when times get tough, you're going to find a way to cut the other person out and get as much paper as you can because it's not based on shared values. So to me, it's really about shared values. Do you see the world the same way? Do you see in each other something that is inspirational, is worth being respected, is trustworthy? So values are really important. The second, from a brand standpoint, is what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to engage new people, new markets? Are you trying to increase price point on things? Are you trying to introduce a new product or a new SKU to your range? So being strategic about what the role of the collaboration is. Just being cool and chasing cool is not what it's about. You need to be a bit more surgical with what this collaboration is intending to do for your business, short term and long term. And then once you align on that, then hopefully the collaboration structure and framework and the people you choose are more relevant to the business issue you're trying to solve and not just relevant to culture. If they're just relevant to culture, then you're trying to your point, co-opt cool. And you can't be cool by association, right? You got to earn that. And ultimately, that person is going to end the contract with you and go somewhere else. So what'd you get for that? You got to make sure that it actually is going to add back to the brand long term, not just short term. And that to me is why you need to be more strategic with what the collaborations intend to do for your business or what your collaboration model is, right? So it's not just one-offs. What is this system that you're building, which is collaborations, in your business model intending to do for your business moving forward? Is it to drive more value, meaning make sure your products are going to be sold at a higher price point more consistently? So if I collaborate on that, vest that you're wearing, the idea is that after you and I collaborate and I bring more energy to that vest, you sell more of those vests without me.
Mm-hmm.
You can't rely on me to sell more vests. I hopefully ignite, and then you can sustain the business from there.
My question to you is, you have been known for building lifestyle brands.
Yes.
What made you get into the CPG brand of Frost?
My Frostman, yes. Drink Frost. So Frost is an organic iced tea infused with adaptogens that me and some friends started. Honestly, it came about once I was at Diageo. One of the things I think that all young brand people need to do is, when you have the privilege of working on different business sectors, understand how they make their product and how they run their business. The beauty of advertising is that you get to work on many different industries. The question is, after having worked on that brand, did you really understand how that brand or that business worked? If you work in automotive, I know one of your accounts is GMC. Do you know how the dealership network works? Do you know how people actually make money? Do you know how the marketing budget actually is, right, made and built and funded by those dealers? Do you know the right business model that they have? Once you understand that, then you want to kind of either start a business or consult or do something else, you now can actually, right, do that with more confidence. So for me, back to my kind of philosophy of insider trading on culture, I learned how to build beverage brands by working at Diageo. I knew how flavor houses worked. I knew what the distribution model was. I knew how to actually build margins and knew how to build, cost structures. So I learned that by running that business. So when I wanted to do it for myself, I realized that there was a gap in the marketplace. I had a bunch of market data because I was actually doing that for a living, and said, why don't we try to kind of fill a gap again in the marketplace with a point of view and a philosophy that is personal to me and my friends, but also we hope is a bit more kind of engaging than the other products that are out there in the category, which are pretty, right, big, boring, and bland.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can we bring lifestyle to the beverage space?
What's the best way for someone with no experience to break into marketing?
To start doing it for yourself. Create whatever you can to get out there in the world and test it. Right? We talk about my philosophy of experience over theory. You can wait to give yourself the chance to kind of get hired, hopefully by a brand, and then learn from them. But they're paying you to learn. But now in the digital age, it doesn't cost you anything, candidly, to learn and get that experience. So how do you actually create as much experience as possible for you? Put the reps in. So brand marketing is everything you do, everywhere, on a local level, in your neighborhood, on your block, right? The corner store, plug to the agency. You can find a way to impact brands. I started out in college, for example, promoting parties. You think about Jerry Lorenzo was a party promoter as well before he was a fashion designer. That's marketing. Our goal was to get people to show up at a certain time for a certain event, oftentimes pay money to have a good time. So they need to be convinced that we were better using their time than they are. We said, you come here at a certain time, it's better than you going anywhere else with that money and that time. That's a very hard thing to do. So selling some sneakers actually can, right, keep you, right, comfortable and be functional, or selling you some Dickies where you can go to work seems a bit more, understandable, a bit more functional and rational than actually throwing a party, which is not a need at all. Yes, enjoyment, having a good time is a need, but there's many ways to do that at home and never leaving your house, saving money maybe, or, right, trekking out at 11 o'clock at night to come to an event with strangers you don't know. That to me was something that it sounds very simple, but was marketing. And that was before I ever worked for a brand.
This episode is sponsored by The Strategist Table. We're all about turning culture into strategy and stories into blueprints. If you're building a brand, navigating creative industries, or just want smarter takes on how culture moves business, pull up a seat. Visit The Strategist Table on Substack to dive deeper into the archive. Big thanks to Put It on the Counter podcast, The Corner Store, and the Marcus Graham Project for making this possible. Now back to the show. Welcome to a new segment of The Cat's Out the Bag. This was created by our creative team, and I actually love it because you always talk about like putting your reps in, make sure you get stuff done. So we have a creative prompt.
All right.
You have 90 seconds to come up with a creative idea.
All right.
This is pretty cool. I like it. It's about Dickies.
All right.
So
good, on brand. I appreciate it.
On brand, and I think this is going to be great. So Dickies is known as a brand beloved by workers, but it's also a cornerstone for street culture. Mm-hmm. An example, Victoria Monet and Kendrick Lamar, when they dance, they're wearing Dickie jumpsuits in their music videos. So the question is, how are we going to market the iconic Dickie jumpsuit toward a luxury audience? You have 90 seconds to ideate.
All right. So Dickies jumpsuit, luxury audience.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I
You
can do
ready?
that. I'm ready when you are.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right.
So yeah, this has been a great talk. You know, it's been an amazing talk. I'm not gonna lie. Me being a fellow strategist, me stumbling upon strategy and advertising, I absolutely love that I get to be around someone that I admire, someone that's a killer. And my fellow art director, Sydney, thank you for holding this information about who your dad is, because after a while, we just keep talking about it. So as a fellow strategist, I really do appreciate people like DC, because he's setting the standard. He's opening up the book. Not many people like to talk about how they got there, and how to be successful, and how to be the next generation of killers like him and the Stanley Lumaxes and stuff like that. So it's been a great talk for me, man. Yeah, we had 90 seconds yet? We had 30 seconds. DC, you ready? This is gonna be great. We get to see his strategic mind. We get to see, you know, culture, but luxury. Victoria Monet, Kendrick Lamar. This is dope. 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, DC.
All
What's
right.
the idea?
So we talked about the jumpsuit, the famous Dickies jumpsuit.
Yeah.
That is a utilitarian product built for workwear. And workwear products are built usually with certain fabrics. Most of these jumpsuits are done with twill, which is a kind of heavyweight fabric. And the first thing you do when you want to kind of connote luxury is you think about a few things. And when I think about products, I'm gonna give you a little shortcut. Is that the first thing you think about with products are form, silhouette, function. What's it right? Worn for fabric, which usually dictates right if it's kind of weather resistant, water resistant, you name it, and then color. So the first thing I would do is I would take the Dickies jumpsuit that is a workwear material. I'd develop a linen version, a silk version, and I'd even do a leather version. And I would make sure that I built those for moments in time. So one example is I'll make sure that we build a Dickies jumpsuit that is ready for the Met Gala and Paris Fashion Week. But I would also make sure that all the folks that are working those events, the folks that are behind the scenes, they are the ones that actually I use as models, not the folks walking the red carpet, the folks that produce the event. Because we're a workwear brand, so we show up with the workers. So the workers are going to have the flyest, right, suits and they're all going to be in uniform. So you're going to start to see them pop up, all right, around the Met Gala or Paris Fashion Week, because Paris Fashion Week is put on, right, by a bunch of construction crews. And so we're going to dip them out in the product. So they're going to be our models throughout those key moments. And you can begin to replicate those at different moments in time. The other thing that we're going to be doing, because it's also an automotive product, right? A coverall or a jumpsuit is actually based on, right, the automotive industry, is that do specific partnerships with luxury car brands. And so when you buy that brand or you actually are going to go to the dealership, we're going to have the staff there wear the luxury jumpsuits as well. So you go buy a Phantom Rolls Royce, when you go buy, a 7 Series, do partnerships. But because Dickies is an American brand, think about American luxury brands that we want to partner with to begin to kind of seed the product at those car dealerships as well as the foreign dealerships. So the first thing I would do is, again, identify the fabrics that connote luxury, identify the moments where luxury is there, and then deliver it with a workwear aesthetic in those moments to get the people who are highbrow to realize that there's actually people that are putting on these events for you all, and you can't forget about the worker.
That was great. I just want to ask one question. Can you give me someone that's in the culture, in hip hop culture, that you see that can be wearing this?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question because I purposely, as you know, what I say is I want to go brand first. I never think about right people. I think about the brand in the moment first and foremost. But yes, of course, I would do a little flip because I want to know who wears it well and who's also known as fashion. So I would go a bit of a left turn. I would go Tracy Ellis Ross.
All right, I'm done. This is great. I'm sitting here thinking Jada Kiss, Fat Joe, Davies. I'm thinking Hov. He said Tracy Ellis Ross. This is done. This is the corner store. This is the cat's out the bag. This is done. I'm over. I'm over it. Oh my gosh, that was crazy. Listen, I just want to thank you for taking this time out for speaking with us. I know you guys have a busy schedule. Man, and to think that we have Cindy Cherry, she's also a killer. She is a strategist. She doesn't even know it. Man, thank you, man. Thank you for taking the time.
Appreciate it.
Put It on the Counter podcast, and this is sponsored by the Corner Store, Marcus Graham Project, and I'm Randy Paul.
I'm Daniel Cherry, DC. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to
Sydney's
have you.
dad.